Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. As I mentioned, today is the Invention of St. Stephen's relics. The Invention meaning the invenio, coming upon. And so after the epistle was the account of his death, how he was ordained a deacon by the apostles. Great miracles and wonders surrounded him. He was an excellent deacon, an excellent man of God. And he witnessed to the Sanhedrin, to the chief priests, and spoke the truth so powerfully that they were cut to the heart. They gnashed their teeth. They were so angry at what they heard. And it's not the anger of righteousness, but the anger of pride. And so they bringing him forth outside the city, stoned him to death. And his title indeed is St. Stephen the Protomartyr, the very first martyr. The feast of his death, St. Stephen's feast proper, is the day after Christmas, December 26th. Right after our Lord's birthday, the very next day, we celebrate, what's going to happen because of Christ, and that is people losing their lives because of him, right? Martyrdom. But today is the feast of the finding of his relics. For after he was stoned, where was his body buried? Where did it go? We're going to find, nobody knew. But we're going to hear about the story today and about the discovery of those relics. So, nearly 400 years after St. Stephen was stoned, in the year 415, on a Friday, a priest Lucian was sleeping. He had a dream of a venerable old man with a long white beard, dressed as a Jewish priest, but marked with crosses. This person told the priest Lucian, "Go to Jerusalem and there tell the bishop to open the tombs in which his remains, those of St. Stephen, were resting, and through this means God would open the gates of his mercy." So this is a priest Lucian in the Holy Land, has this vision in the year 415. In his vision, Lucian asks who the man was. "I am Gamaliel," he said, "who instructed Paul the apostle in the law. And it was I who took the body of St. Stephen after his stoning, which lay exposed in a field one day and one night, but was not touched by birds or beasts. I carried it off in the nighttime and brought it secretly to my house, where I celebrated his funeral rites for 40 days and caused his body to be laid in my own tomb. Furthermore, Nicodemus, that Jew who had come to Jesus by night, lieth there in that same sepulchre in another coffin. Nicodemus had been excommunicated by the Jews for following Christ and was banished out of Jerusalem. Whereupon I received him into my own house in the countryside, and there I maintained him to the end of his life. And after his death I buried him honorably near Stephen. I likewise buried there my own son Abibas, who died before me at the age of 20 years. His body is in a third coffin, where I myself was also interred after my death. My wife Ethna and my eldest son Semelius, who were not willing to embrace the faith of Christ, were buried elsewhere." Thus, the vision that this priest Lucian received inexplicably one night on a Friday. Now, this priest Lucian feared to pass for an impostor if he was too credulous, and so he prayed that if the vision be from God, it might return 2 more times, and he fasted on bread and water. The next Friday, the same day as the first vision, Gamaliel appeared again and commanded the priest Lucian to go to the bishop of Jerusalem. As a sign of the relics, he showed him 3 baskets full of roses, 2 of white and 1 of red. The white roses represented Gamaliel and his son Abibas. The red roses represented St. Stephen. Gamaliel told Lucian where he would find the sarcophagus in the tomb and who was in each one. Having said this, he disappeared. Lucian continued his fasting, and he awaited the third apparition. The following Friday, at the same hour as twice before, Gamaliel appeared once again, and this time upbraided him with threats for his neglect, adding that the drought which then afflicted the land would be removed only by his obedience and the discovery of these relics. Lucian, being now terrified, promised that he would wait no longer. and thus the very next day he set off to find the bishop of Jerusalem to relate to him the entire story. I would like to pause here, though, and kind of mention, or rather speculate, why is it that this priest Lucian is receiving a vision of Gamaliel? As he himself said, Gamaliel was the priest who instructed the Apostle Paul in the law. Gamaliel was also the ones who, when the chief priests and so on were wondering what to do about the apostles, Gamaliel told them, if these men be from God, if these men be not from God, then it will come of nothing. Remember this rabble-rouser? Nothing came of him. Remember this one? Nothing came of him. So if they're not from God, you can't do anything. But if they are from God, who can fight God and win? It was Gamaliel who had told the Jews that. So why him? Why Gamaliel? Well, recall, who was it that those who had stoned St. Stephen, where did they lay their cloaks? At the feet of St. Paul. And St. Paul approved of their decision to kill St. Stephen. Now, St. Stephen, when he died, said, "Let not this charge be laid unto them," and then he gave up his spirit. So St. Stephen did not blame those who killed him. He prayed for his persecutors, and he certainly would have prayed for St. Paul. So St. Stephen the Protomartyr is praying for St. Paul, and we can think that it was those prayers in part which effected St. Paul's conversion. And of course, after a person is converted, St. Paul became that fearless lion of God, and he himself converted many, many souls. But St. Paul would have been sorrowful over what he had done previously. St. Paul would have repented of having consented to the stoning of St. Stephen. So I'm just imagining in heaven, St. Paul perhaps wanted to go and appear to this priest Lucian himself and point out the relics of St. Stephen. But perhaps it was said, no, we'll send your teacher Gamaliel, and he's going to be the one to discover the relics of St. Stephen. So we can speculate, but I think it's interesting to think about that people remain people even after they die. And heaven is full of people, and people do stuff. They have thoughts, they have feelings, they have friendships, and this is the kind of stuff that we need to realize this goes on even in heaven. So this is just my own speculation, but I think it's a good way for us to keep in communion with the saints and think about, why did this saint appear to this other one? How come this saint and not somebody else? Right? That's a way of we can think about the past and think about their lives and make connections. So that's simply a something we can think about. Why did Gamaliel appear to Lucian? Because of his connection to St. Paul and his connection to St. Stephen. So perhaps this is going through Lucian's mind as he is going to Jerusalem to go to the bishop. And he arrives, he tells the bishop everything, and the bishop believes Lucian and tells him that once he has found the relics, to return immediately. I mean, interesting that the bishop didn't say, come again 3 times. I just believed him right away. Lucian set out and went to a field in which lay an old heap of stones, and he was sure that in this field, under that pile of stones, he would find the tomb. However, as he was nearing the place, he was met by a monk, and this monk told him he would never find the tomb there. Lucian was a little surprised and a little alarmed, as he had told no one of the visions except the bishop just a few hours previously. The monk replied, "Gamaliel appeared to me also, and he showed me the tomb in which the relics you seek will be found. There will be 3 sarcophagus adorned with gold. In one of them, more elevated than the others, will lay St. Stephen, and in the others an old man and a young one." Upon hearing this, Lucian praised God for having given another witness of this revelation as well. So he follows the monk to the tomb, and in searching it, they find everything as described. Upon the sarcophagus inside were inscribed the names Stephen, Gamaliel, and Nicodemus. So the bishop was informed, and he came right away with a great crowd following. Upon opening St. Stephen's coffin, the earth shook, and there came out of the coffin an agreeable odor, such that those present said they had never smelled before. And among the multitudes of people assembled, 73 were healed of various illnesses and diseases on the spot. The protomartyr's body had been reduced to bones, but these were whole and in their natural situation. And that very day, as had been prophesied, it began to rain upon the parched earth, and the drought was ended. And thus far, the account of the finding of St. Stephen's relics. So this story, I'm sure, would be held as legendary these days and not worthy of much belief. But as I say so often before, we have to take it that this is the witness of our past. This is the witness and the writings of the fathers in the faith who came before us, and it is an act of impiety to disbelieve these legends without sufficient reason. So our position must be, unless there is overwhelming evidence to the contrary, our default position should be to believe every legend and every story unless we have evidence to the contrary, great evidence. And these are because things like this are given for our instruction. Of course, we should expect this to happen. If a man can rise from the dead, why is a man having a vision impossible? Why is this not believable? Why shouldn't we believe this? This is truth, and it is our duty to know these truths and to tell these truths to our children, but also to the world, that the world may believe it and see from such overwhelming occurrence of these things over and over again, it's convincing to the world. But I would say, the modern world is distrustful of the past, but thinking about what happened before. So I would say, that's what the modern church and the world needs to recognize, is just like the finding of these old bones, these old relics of St. Stephen, and there was rain upon the land and great graces poured forth. I would say it's going to be the discovery of the Latin Mass, the old bones, the liturgy, which people think are dry and dusty and worth nothing and should be put away in a tomb and is dead and buried. It's the finding of those old relics which is going to renew the church and bring that rain of grace upon the land, and we'll get priests and nuns and conversions and vocations and so on. That is, I think, what is going to be necessary. So let us pray to St. Stephen, pray to St. Paul, Gamaliel, this good priest Lucian, pray for their intercession that we might hasten the discovery of the Latin Mass by being good examples, be good ambassadors of the Latin Mass, which is friendly, welcoming, and joyful at the treasure that we have, and wanting to share that with others. That's going to be our way of bringing it back and bringing those graces to the earth. So may God bless you all.